Well, I am so honored to be with the magical Shannon Gill. Hope I said your last name right.
Sorry.
Um, that I actually just met, but I can tell already, like you exude light and frequency and magic. I can see it in your eyes, I can see it in your field. And I'm just so honored to have you here. So thank you for joining us. And you have such an interesting background. I'm a little bit familiar with astrology, not deep in it. I'm actually going to be learning medical astrology, which I'm excited about.
Great.
I'd love to know a little bit about your background, if you can share with the audience, and how you brought these unique pieces together, like Buddhism and trance dance and all these magical tools and modalities.
Definitely. Thank you. And thank you so much for that introduction. I see you as a reflection of radiance and light and magic and all of those things. So I appreciate that very much. And I'm really honored to be here with you and your community. Uh, I do have a sort of an eclectic sort of weaving of different modalities, but essentially my focus is on being an instrument of the awakening. And I suppose that I arrived here through my own initiatory journey, through a lot of darkness in my adolescence and loss of parents at a young age and embezzlement of my trust fund by my family. So it sort of threw me into the underworld as an adolescent. And what I understand now about that is that it was preparing me, it was initiating me into understanding some of the greater mysteries, which what I would say now, the way that I have come to learn about that through my own evolution is the connection between the light and the dark. And, I see every day with clients that oftentimes those that go the deepest, the darkest, also fly the highest because there's something about that hero's journey or that dark night of the soul that is necessary in a lot of ways because it's the sort of cracking open of all the programming. It's this sort of mythological descent, Vinana, for example, where she goes down through the seven gates, and at each gate she strips off a layer of clothing until she's naked in the underworld. And that metaphor, of course, is all of the pretense. It's all the addictions. It's all the false beliefs. It's all the programming that has been so pervasive for the last few thousand years as we've been in the dark ages. And so, looking back, it was a really crazy, wild experience for many years for me, which I will write a book about someday. But uh, what I came to learn is that my own kind of climbing out of the hell realm was going to be my medicine. And it really started with, after my spiritual awakening, like in my 20s, with music. And, I would like drive around as a teenager in my car that I had like woofers in the trunk to escape my parents. And, I'd smoke a joint. Hope that's okay to say.
Of course.
But there was something happening because the bass was like rattling loose the trauma. And I would find that I'd have this emotional response, this release of tears. So that started opening doorways to me around dance and music and things like that. And so I studied music therapy for a few years here in Texas. But I was still having this, even though I'd been in therapy for years and all this stuff, I felt like I wasn't resentful anymore. I felt okay in my thoughts and in my mind about what had gone on in my life, but I still was sort of tormented or caged in by my mind and my thoughts, which is what took me into Buddhism. And so then I left and went to Naropa in Boulder, which is a Buddhist university, and I got my degree in a Buddhist psychology, where I learned about the levels of consciousness, how to work with your thoughts. We'd meditate 2.5 hours a day as a class. I mean, it was really intense. And I also was simultaneously studying dance, music, and art therapy. Then I had my first astrology reading, and I was totally blown away. And I entered into that realm of understanding, like I was already knew I was going to be a therapist of some kind, but whenever I had my first astrology reading, it was on my 30th birthday.
Wow.
Yeah, so I didn't find it till I was 30. Well, that's not true. I dabbled, but I didn't have my first full reading. Because I had always sort of kind of feared my chart or feared people when I was a dabbler would look at my chart and they would gasp because I have 5 planets in the eighth house of Scorpio, and I'd already had a lot of intensity. I had loss and death and alcoholism, all this stuff, right? And then I had my first real reading, who then became my teacher. I knew that day I was to become an astrologer because he looked at my chart and he's like, wow, you are so powerful and you're here to become a descent master. I was like, oh my God, what does that mean?
That.
And it was
Goose.
basically, yeah, what I understand now is that all those initiations into the underworld, into the shadow realms of human existence, which I understand now is more like it's collective. We're all going through this, right? And that's really where I ended up. And kind of my focus today is as an evolutionary astrologer is I'm looking at the evolution of the soul, the personal and the collective soul through these larger periods of time. So these eras. And astrology is just invaluable. I feel like we left ourselves clues, and astrology is one of them to
Yeah, it's
help.
like a map, right?
Yeah, it's literally like a map. And I always tell my clients, I'm like, if you're going on a trip, don't you usually look at a map? I
Mhm.
mean, every now and then someone can take a walkabout and like just decide every day where they're going, and that's cool, but that's not generally how we travel.
Right. Not
So,
even in our day to day, right? We usually have a calendar or a schedule or
yeah,
something that's grounding us.
to-do list, right? Like all the things. So, my passion is my work has evolved a lot actually just in the last 5 years since 2020 because I feel like all of us, right? So basically, to back up just a minute, we're at this precarious moment again as a humanity on the planet, which we come to every 2,000 years.
Right.
And what we understand as astrologers is that this is the time that one era ends and another era begins. And it's known as the astrological ages, or it's also called the yuga cycles in Vedic astrology, or like the Greeks would say the golden age, the bronze age, the iron age. So they're all pointing to the same thing, is that humanity is constantly going through these cycles. I mean, time is a history of cycles, and that's how we can kind of foresee the future. However, I don't practice predictive astrology because I believe that it's a meeting of fate and free will. I think it's very dangerous, actually. People that do predictive, I think it can do a lot of damage. So I'm not in favor of that. But we're the midwives, the doulas of the death of the Pisces age and the birth of the Aquarian age. And everybody always says, well, when did that start? When did it actually begin? And it's really challenging to know for certain, and I don't think it really operates that way. I feel like it's more of the cusping, like when does the sun rise? Is it
Right.
when you actually see the orb, or is it when you see the glow coming up over the horizon? And so we can think about, the two archetypes. And this is why astrology is so invaluable, is because if you can read the archetypes and the symbolism, it helps us to decode, which gives us information about how to navigate,
Right.
right? And so the Pisces age, the glyph for Pisces is the two fish swimming in opposite directions. So it was an age of duality, an age of illusion of separation. The fish were never separated. In all the ancient texts, they were connected by a golden cord. But humanity, since the beginning of time, has gone through these periods of darkness or being asleep, but basically what the dark ages is that we're asleep to the truth.
Right. We
Yes,
can't.
we just can't see it. We're in an illusion of separation, and that's what the Pisces age was. And there was a lot of interference to help us kind of like perpetuate that program of separation. And we were programmed that we're powerless, that the power was outside of us. The power was outside of us if it was God, or if it was the church, or if it was the politicians, or it was the doctors. We gave up our power to a small faction of consciousness. And I don't see things dualistically. That's another big, I think, important shift from age of duality to Aquarius, is that even if there was some dark agendas on the planet and some dark players, they just offered to play that role. We're all one consciousness. We're all one mind. And so we've got to stop with the division.
So quick question for you, Shannon. How do people transcend that in themselves, right? Because obviously 2020 was this huge shift, right? I think it was the Great Awakening is what, just my words, what I experienced.
So
It's the
true.
Great Awakening of people suddenly starting to realize, wow, I've given my power to this doctor. How do I take it back, right? How do I start living from the inside out versus the outside in?
Right. This is the quest that we're on, isn't it?
Yes.
So it's different for all of us. And there's usually something that triggers the question. First, we have to kind of wake up out of the matrix just to even start to understand that everything we're being fed through the media is false, is a narrative, it's programming, it's part of it. So we have to start to learn to listen to our intuition and ask questions. And you have to also be willing to face the darkness. You have to be willing to face the truth that it's not a pretty picture. You know, when you start going down that rabbit hole, and this is why I have a lot of compassion for those that are either resistant or not at the level of awakening that some others are, perhaps. Not that there's levels, but it's a journey, right? You know, to be able to really metabolize the level of the corruption and all of the things that have been a part of our world for the last few thousand years, it can instigate a dark night of the soul. And so cognitive dissonance is there to protect the psyche. We don't need everyone waking up at the same time. It could be chaos.
Right. I was going to say it would be chaotic if everybody woke up at the same time.
Right, because you know from your experience, it's kind of intense, or maybe not kind of, it's very intense.
Very intense.
Let's be honest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I started waking up to some of these things 20 years ago. So, and I knew this was coming, and I have astrology as the context. But for those people that don't, that have sort of been believed everything that has been presented, it's incremental awakening. And so I think that first of all, I think it's really not conspiracy anymore to know that there's a lot of corruption in our government, in our medical associations. It's basically all across the board because it's all tied into that same toxic root, right?
Yes.
And so this is this shift into Aquarius where we're going to reconstruct all these systems. So I don't think that there's any question that there's been some nefariousness going on for a very long time, right? And so I feel like there's something about going back to nature and starting to look into how do we connect ourselves back to the natural rhythms. And if we're trying to reach some state of, if it has to do with health, for example, you know, putting a lot of artificial foods and chemicals and even some of the medications and everything is just, it can be toxifying, right? And so start to listen, start to ask questions, start to attune to the natural rhythms, be outside more, have feet on the ground in the sun, and ask questions. Ask questions to your higher self. Show me the way, show me the truth, you know? I mean, that's what I'm saying. There's no prescribed path for everyone.
But it does require curiosity, you know,
Mhm.
like asking questions, willingness to let go of what we've known. So willingness to step into the unknown, right? I think
Mhm.
are huge, huge pieces. And then it requires trust, like trusting,
100%.
right? So I don't know how much you know about my background, but I was in financial services for 29 years.
Wow.
My first health crisis took me deep into the natural world. And I realized, wow, you know, I was a kid who climbed trees. I was in the creek on the grass, gazing up at the stars. And suddenly I found myself sitting at a desk under fluorescent lights in front of a computer, 10, 12, 14, sometimes 20 hours a day, right? Not moving much except to run to the bathroom and run back. And then in 2015, so 10 years ago, I ended up with stage 4 cancer.
Wow.
And so that was my dark night of the soul,
Wow.
when, I was told, this is what you have to do. And my body was screaming, no, if you do that, you'll die and you won't fulfill your mission. And so I
Right.
had to kind of stop listening to everybody except my higher self. I had to start listening to my body.
Yes.
And I took a completely different path in the natural world. And now I
Wow.
work with plant stem cells and plant essences for awakening and for healing. And, you could have never predicted this from what I was doing prior.
Right.
Those were my dark nights of the soul. And I'm now seeing this because I have a healing practice. I do hands-on healing. And I'm
Amazing.
seeing this with most people is they're going through these dark nights.
Right.
And so how can astrology,
Mhm.
what you're teaching, how can that support them? I'm all for, like, if I can help somebody not experience the 2x4,
Yes.
great. Or to
Yes.
make it, allow the shift to be more gentle.
Yes, I 100% agree. Astrology is invaluable in the sense that it is our blueprint. It is a map. It is going to show you basically the template of your expression of God consciousness this time on planet Earth. I also, with evolutionary astrology, I'm able to see into the past lives, which is the karma that we've brought in. So we all have some kind of baggage. We all have something that we're bringing with us that we need to clean up. And so I focus a lot on what that is and then the dharma. So it's all about cleaning up the karma and stepping into the dharma. And and then your archetypal rulers are kind of like the costume you're wearing. So finding alignment with your sun, your moon, and your ascendant, right? And making space for these different parts and then aligning with that map is a way to activate your your God code. And then there's also like transits, which is where then we can look at the current moving sky, the current planetary alignment, where everything is now and how it relates to where it was when you were born. And that tells us what season you're in, what chapter you're in, because there's a season to plant, there's a season to prune, there's a season, right, for the harvest. So it can help in decision and navigation. So it's just like, I don't know what I would do without it. And it also helps us, like my work is really about helping to like reconceptualize the challenges. Like your health crisis is like, oh my God, what would you have done if that didn't happen? You wouldn't have had your awakening. You wouldn't be this amazing healer right now. Like there's a way that we start to embrace the parts of us, our shadow, places we're ashamed or the trauma from childhood and be like, let's get curious about what's underneath this and then what's beyond this. It's like alchemy, like coal to diamonds. And so I'm really passionate, I guess, about helping people to make peace with those shadow pieces and then to move on and to become part of the larger story. And that's the Aquarian age where we realize we're all organs of an organism and we're coming together to create this new earth template. And so the natural world, doing the shadow work, absolutely, it's your faith. I mean, right now things are very intense on the planet, right? And they typically always are when there's a death of an era and the birth of a new. World wars, pandemics, this is all very typical. But we can trust that because we're no different than nature. I've taught my kids since they were little, you can't have summer all year. Like we have to go through the winter. Things die. We're just doing it as a humanity. And I think also just really like recognizing the magnitude of this moment. We chose to be here for this showdown.
That's the best.
I mean, truly, like not 100 generations of our ancestors stood where we stand today. So we are the way showers. And I also think that we forget that we have so much invisible guidance, like our spirit helpers, our higher self, our ancestors. So asking for support. Unplugging from the mainstream news, being in nature, becoming curious about these larger cycles and what we're doing as a humanity, following your passion, your bliss, what lights you up. This is a frequency thing. I know that you know that. The shift
Yes.
in consciousness is all about frequency. And I actually work with frequency medicine now, and I'm working with my clients with Nikola Tesla and Rife because it is very dense on the planet right now. We're
Yes.
being asked a lot to bridge the worlds. We're still in the matrix. We're still plugged in because we have to survive. And then we have to like follow our bliss and our passion and create this new earth. And it's like, oh my gosh. And it's like,
It's like this tension of opposites, right? That we're holding both.
we are. And sometimes we're popping in and out of these different timelines. And so it's a wild ride that we're on. But working on a frequency level is really, 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 I think, the cutting edge of future medicine. And also, even if you're not actually working with frequency technology, we know that frequency has to do with our emotional state. So doing things that make us happy,
Right.
dancing, singing. If you're having a funky day, put on some music, put on some aromatherapy, like change your sensual reality, because that works on a cellular level through vibration. So there's so many tools. There's really so many tools. And I think that the first step on on the path is asking the question, or it's a surrendering and just saying, please show me, just
Right.
show me what I need to see to find alignment with the one true source so that I can serve my greatest and with joy and ease and happiness. It's uh it sounds maybe a little cliche, but I see it over and over. We overcomplicate things.
Oh, we do. We like to do that, don't we, as humans?
I know. Yeah. And so you're not going to do it all at once, and you're not going to get everything turned around all at once. So it's like also just compassion for ourselves and finding your tribe, being around other people that are vibrating at the same level or you are, because there's a lot of mind viruses out there. There's a lot of division still. And anytime we're pointing the finger at this political party or that political leader, we're still perpetuating the Pisces age.
Right.
The
We're in duality. Yep.
projection,
Yep.
only one consciousness.
So I get this a lot. How does somebody find their tribe? What would that look like?
Mhm. Yeah, it's important. And I think it, of course, varies on where you live, right? And so, like, if you live in a place where it's not easy to do that, or maybe it's the age group thing that you're in, I think that looking on like Meetup and finding groups that interest you.
Okay.
Sometimes you can find groups on other social medias, but Meetup's pretty cool because it's like they have everything. And you'll be like, oh, an astrology group, coffee group that meets once a week, or whatever it is, hiking, nature. If you want to find your community of people that have similar passions as you, then go towards the passion and see who shows up,
Right.
see who's there. And then, if you have the capacity, then create it like yourself, like meaning it doesn't have to be this huge like live-in community, just more like start having a once a month book club in your house, or once a week, and it's like we're all just having to figure it out. There's not one way. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the isolation of 2020 and the disconnect, you can still see the ripple effects, right? In people, especially if they don't have a community. And I
It's
think it's so important.
It is so important. It is so important. And even if it's just a couple of people that you meet with regularly, it makes all the difference. So it's also just prioritizing that. It's really easy to just kind of, that's part of the disease of our time, is all this compartmentalization
Yes.
and overwork and trying to survive. Yeah, I'm in a place right now of trying to slow down a little bit and kind of reshuffling some priorities. And one of them is just like doing nothing right now. So
Right.
it's like ease, which doesn't come easy for me because I'm a Virgo and I'm like a busy bee. So I have to ask you, what is your sun sign?
I'm a Sagittarian,
Ah, of course.
and I've got Taurus ascendant.
Hmm.
I have got Pisces moon, and I cannot remember my sun.
Well, if you're Sagittarius sun, when were you born?
December 2nd.
December 2nd?
Mhm.
Yeah, you're Sagittarius. So those are your three ruling archetypes. So Sagittarius, of course, is the seeker. It's the teacher traveler here to be on a never-ending journey of the expansion of your consciousness.
That would be me.
Then to cultivate your own philosophy and then share it with others to be a voice of buoyancy, hope, and optimism. Because Sagittarius follows Scorpio in the zodiac, and Scorpio is that underworld. And then the phoenix flies in the ashes into Sagittarius. So you're like the spokesperson for that
The underworld.
of the underworld.
Coming out of the underworld.
But the Taurus part of you is the divine feminine, the artist priestess that taught all the young women about the art of pleasure. So it's very earthy and sensual and creative and connected to the natural world and to it's the goddess on the couch being fed grapes. Like there's something about beauty and love and, Aphrodite type of energy. And then Pisces is the mystic. And so that's the oracle, the intuitive, the psychic, very, very sensitive, empathic energy.
Very much so.
Yeah. So, yeah, cool. That's a really powerful trinity.
Yeah, and I'll be 60 this year.
What? No way.
Yes. Feel like I'm 30, but I'll be 60. So I
So I'm
have,
sure the health journey just has totally revitalized you.
yes.
So
Well,
I was trained in ozone therapy. Oh, sorry.
no, I just said because I came back to myself,
Yeah.
right? I stopped living my life out here. And I mean, I grew up military Catholic family, right? So very um programmed,
Uh-huh.
right way and a wrong way to do everything. So, like you've been through the underworld, come out, and I'm here to transcend paradigms and systems and all of those things.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I had a little can cure journey myself. That's what I call it because
Mhm.
that word cancer is loaded with
Yes.
with the destructive, money-based fearmonger program, big business.
Yes.
So I call it can cure. So I'd like to just share that with your community if you
Love
know anyone. And anyway, it took me down my own rabbit hole with the physiology of part of healing, which is just another one of my initiations. And I've been trained in ozone therapy. And one of my best friends here is a doctor of Chinese medicine, and she's like a medical warrior. She's on a mission to train as many people as she can, and that you can have your own home system. You flooding your body with oxygen, it's anti-pathogenic. Nothing can exist in
Right.
that level. So that with frequency medicine and all the things, we have all these tools now. This
Right.
Aquarian age is bringing all these technologies that were repressed.
Yes.
Were repressed from us because they actually heal.
Right.
So this is the level of like revealing that some people are having a hard time swallowing that actually the people that we trust the most, our doctors or whatever, are actually sometimes contributing in the opposite of health. I won't say,
Right.
but unfortunately it's true, and you know that.
Oh, yes, I see it all the time. And they're trained in pharmaceuticals. They're not trained in healing, right? The first do no harm, the Hippocratic Oath. I don't know if this is true, but I had a doctor tell me they took it out of the graduation. So they do not have to take the Hippocratic Oath anymore. And that's very telling, right? So my question is this. So many people are in fear. So,
Mhm.
I think people are waking up to the frequency as medicine, to sound heal, to all these modalities that we have, and yet they still have fear. It's like, oh my gosh, EMFs. I'm getting poisoned by EMFs, right? I'm like, go play a sound bowl, go listen to some Hertz music, right? How do we support the unraveling of that programming of a natural state of fear, which is not a natural state at all? It's been a programmed state for people.
Right.
So,
Right.
what would you recommend?
Yes. So I feel like it's really helpful to, again, I go back to some of these simplistic teachings around non-dual thinking that can't have summer without winter. We have to go through, and we know historically humanity has gone through so many of these big shifts in these larger cycles, and it's always chaotic. and we're eternal. So that's that, there's that, you know, double down on the fact that we're eternal. Um, I like to look at how there's actually medicine and intelligence in the darkness. So for example, in 2020, the big threat, there's no food on the shelves, right? What happened? A lot of people started growing food.
Yeah, what a gift.
You know, oh my God, they're trying to take my frequencies and, you know, make me a cyborg. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to take control of our own frequencies. So that threat, that thing that creates the fear, is actually a mobilizing force to awaken, because we're lazy and apathetic as a humanity for thousands of years because we've been asleep. So we
Right.
have to have something dramatic, something that's shocking. This is those traumas, right, that come in that wake us up, like your descent, like, whoa, right? And so we're going through it now as a humanity. So there's this term I always use, it's a Carl Jung term, enantiodromia, where he talks about uh that contrasting energy. Is like when you're pulling back on a bow and arrow and you're pulling back in this opposing direction. So you can think about this as the dark force. When it finally releases, it takes a quantum leap forward into the future. So that's what we're doing. And everything's being revealed right now that has always been there. It's just been covert.
Yeah.
So
So it's a remembering, really, right? A
yeah,
reconnecting.
yeah, and trusting that the darkness is part of the evolution. And so, and also there's a lot of strategic implementation of uh, fear porn into our media channels
Yes.
to destabilize us, because that parasitic energy feeds on that. And so we just have to rise above it, you know,
Right.
and we have to trust that there's something happening for a reason. And also to remember that we know through even quantum physics now that what we focus on comes into existence. So if there's something that's freaking you out, quit tuning into it. Stop
Right.
watching the news. If you can walk the tightrope of non-duality and objectively watch the news without being triggered, then that's fine. Because you also don't want to go to the opposite extreme and put your head in the sand.
Right. See
This
that a lot.
this master's level that we're being called to, right? So we need to just be, and this is where my Buddhist practice is invaluable, like the focus of our mind and our consciousness on what we want to expand. I can't emphasize that enough. We hear it all the time. What you see, we manifest, right? But we also can be contributing to manifesting that which we don't want.
Right.
If we're not only focusing on it, but we're giving it our emotional energy. So
Yes.
it just has to do with our spiritual practice. We just have to keep practicing and coming back to center and coming back to the now.
I think it's the most important thing that we can do to empower ourselves now is to have a spiritual practice daily that we are committed to.
100%.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. Our anchor.
Easy. It's too easy to get caught up in what's happening out here. We're human, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
so what is happening on the planet? Can you share a little bit more about where you started here, which is, we're ending an era and coming into a new era. And of course, yeah, if you could just share a little bit more.
Yeah. I mean, so that's just massive, right? So that's the backdrop. We're leaving that age of darkness and duality into the Aquarian age where the lights are going on. This is the prophesized time of the apocalypse. It's in the Bible, the Revelations. All that means is that it's the time of the great revealing, which means it's the time of the great awakening. But what are we waking up to? The whole spectrum of light and dark. So we just have to know that this is part of the process. And the Aquarian age is like those two fish of Pisces in opposite directions turn and face each other and recognize each other in the mirror as fractals of the one God. So the Aquarian age is about starting to see through the one mind, that there's only one consciousness, and we're all just like jewels and in the net, fractals of light of the one. And so that's the backdrop. And as I said, there's a cusping period, which I think it really started in the 60s with the Cultural Revolution, when we started to like fight back against the system, against the corruption, wanting equality, sexual liberation, right? 2012 was another big turning point. So there's been these sort of like threshold moments. 2012 was a big one. 2017, 2018, another big one. And then 2020 was like,
Yeah.
like the final, like the last curtain, and this real reset period, right? Um, Now where we are this year, 2025, astrologers cannot find a year in history where we have ever had what's happening this year. This is how historical, which is all five of the outer planets shifting signs within 1 year. The outer planets are the slower moving bodies, and they're called the transpersonal planets because they affect the collective. The inner planets are the personal planets. All five of them shifting into a new sign. Even if one shifts into a new sign, it's a collective shift. So
Right.
it's massive. And it's the year of the snake in Chinese astrology. It's a 9 year in numerology, which is the last
Completion.
number, right? Completion. So we're in a transition year where, so many of us have been doing this work for a really long time. Some people are just waking up. It's okay. It's all perfect, right? And some people will go to their grave asleep to some of this, and that's perfectly fine too. What we have been looking towards is this, what, like gene keys. Are you tuned into gene keys at all, right? This is a biological process that's happening to us as a species, a mutation of our genes that were supposedly intervened in sometime in galactic history to separate us from our psychic capacity where we were all awake. So at some point in one of those bigger, larger shifts from like a golden age period back into the darkness, there was some interference in our capacity to be in that unity consciousness. Well, we're coming back towards that. And apparently some of our chromosomes are going to be coming back online where we start to be more in our telepathic nature. So the telepathy tapes, right?
Yeah.
So that's a symbol of the doorway, the gateway that's opening, right? This population, it being proven that they're all telepathically connected. Well, we all are.
They're showing us.
They're
They're teaching.
showing us. They're showing us, and they don't have the mental faculties that we do to communicate otherwise. So it's like their primary way. Um, and so this is the year that we kind of are like shedding some of those last skins. And so I just say, you know, this is the year to like clean out the closets and clean out the basement. And also, so much magic is happening. When we're like tapped into this like more fifth dimensional reality, instant manifestation, quite like you getting the letter, like we're selling your house. It's like, okay, thank you. I'm moving. Bye.
Yeah, it's created instantaneously and easy, right? It's magic. It's just boom, it's here.
And that's when you're on the right frequency. Let me phrase that. I don't want to ever think that something's right or wrong. When you're attuned to the higher frequencies, which is the frequency of truth and God consciousness and the divine, things flow.
Mhm.
We're exempt from third dimensional reality laws, which is, oh, well, the housing market sucks right now and nothing's doing, like all that narrative, because
Mhm.
people get so caught up in what they're seeing on the news. It's like, you know what? You can just skip that timeline. You can just quantum leap that right over that and magically manifest exactly what you desire. But first you have to believe. So our belief systems are everything. So we got to clear out all the disbelief, the false beliefs, the limiting beliefs, scarcity beliefs, and that's going to then inform the thoughts. And so we got to keep our thoughts focused on the horizon line, on the
Mm.
other side of the birth canal, the new earth, right? Not on the dying, chaotic, right? We don't need to watch that.
Right.
We don't really need to pay attention to that so much. And then we just have to be in the frequency of joy. And then I call it pronoia as opposed to paranoia. This is actually not my term, but I borrowed it from Rob Bresney. Paranoia is pronoia. You're expecting greatness. There's an
Right.
expectation. There's a knowingness that these are the true laws of the universe.
Yes. I was very fortunate in my awakening to do a 2-year study with the 13 Indigenous grandmothers.
Whoa.
radically, I mean, totally helped me wake up. And they said back in 2013, you will see a lot more autistic children coming in because they're here to remind us that we can communicate telepathically and we will learn from them. And here, then the telepathy tapes came. I said, oh my gosh, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But
Wow.
really, a lot of what you're sharing, I think, is held, like you said, it's been suppressed. So it's been here in the indigenous wisdom. They have carried this through their line and they know this.
Yeah.
Right. So there are people on this planet that have known this. They just haven't had a strong voice. And it's amazing that people like you are coming forward at a time where people need it more than ever, to have you shine the light, to say everything you need, you have within you. And
And we chose this. We
yes,
chose to be here.
to be here. It's that empowering piece, right?
Yes.
And I look at everything I've personally experienced in my life, and I'm so grateful for even the dark nights of the soul, because they catapulted me forward into where I am now, where I can actually support people in their own awakening.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. So what final words of wisdom do you have for this beautiful audience?
I keep getting drawn to the painting behind you of the bridge, and that there's the mist. And while we've been flirting with this birth canal between the ages for decades, I feel like we're at the final push. And birth is bloody, it's nonlinear, it's, yeah, it's even dangerous sometimes, right? And so we're being charged with tapping into the wonder and the trust and the faith of our eternal nature, and the returning of what I like to feel is like the garden, the return of the state of the Garden of Eden on earth. And that we have to go through this last push. We have to push ourselves through. And that's, even the wars and things that are going on, it's like there's this purging happening, right? And so there's something about trusting the unknown. And that's the mist, is what I feel like. You can't even see the other side of the bridge. You can't even see it. And so this is where our deep root in our faith and our knowing, and actually when we're tapping into that deeper state where we connect into source, we're shown the magic. We get proof every day in how the laws of the universe truly work. And so trust the process. Trust the process. Keep things simple. Stay in the ever-present now. Do your best. Be easy on yourself. And find out what it is that taps you into that frequency of joy.
Lights you up.
Yeah, what lights you up. And it's,
Yeah.
I see people all day long wanting to know what their purpose is.
I
Oh,
sit on my desk every day. Joy is the ultimate creator.
yeah.
And it's just a constant reminder, to stay in that joy, connect to that joy.
Yeah, the practice of it too is important. Yeah, because so many people come to me and they want to know what their purpose is. And astrology, helps with that, of course. But at the end of the day, I always say, I feel like it's less what you're doing and it's more a state of being. If you're in the state of joy, that means you're tapped into the light, then you can be a grocery store checker and smiling and making people's day.
Yes.
It's the ego that thinks we have to do something really like profound and big. If it lights you up and you feel like your contribution gives you joy, then that's your purpose.
Right.
So,
well, how can people find you, Shannon?
my website is a good place, which is just my name, Shannon Lee Gill, and it's Lei Gill, Gill. And yeah, I have lots of other projects, and they're all on there. So yeah.
Well, you are amazing. I'm so grateful that you were able to share so much, very profound and so needed at a time for everyone right now.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. It's great to know you.
You too.